that, or this, it would be better if we do whatever. All along the way, if you all have suggestions or thoughts around our charter and what we should or shouldn't have in it, please make sure you send those comments to Susie, who will continue to gather them. And as we begin the next process of review, we'll continue to consider those things. Lots of times there's things that we want to put in the charter that belong more in a policy, and we don't necessarily have enough policies right now. So we're going to continue to work on those things as we move forward. But I, again, appreciate your input and your patience in the process. So what I'm going to do right now is I hope that you've all had a chance to see the charter. I know it was sent out. I'm going to go through a couple of places and highlights where we have made some changes. I will tell you that there is some language that was put in based on our technical assistance from HUD, things that they felt like needed to be in our charter to make it stronger. So we inserted those things. Can call your attention to some of those. And then just living with the world the way it is right now, there are some things that we thought would be advantageous for us to add and change a little bit. We put it out for public comment, and we did have comments from a few people. We'll go over those as well to make sure everyone knows the thoughts of folks who've been looking at this. And then hopefully in the end, we will take a vote on this charter and I hope ratify it. Before we do that, we'll make sure that if there are any other changes or recommendations that anyone has, we give folks the opportunity to express that. I would ask that you try to keep your comments direct to the moment and to what we're talking about, because this can be incredibly cumbersome to do this way. Please remember as well that when we get back together face to face after all of this is said and done, we will have to re-ratify all of the votes that we've taken. At least that's my understanding. So there will be further discussion as we go through all this in the future. All right, if no one has any burning questions, you have the ability to raise your little hand over on the side. Please do that. Susie, I'm gonna ask you to help me keep up with raised hands to make sure that everyone who wants to make a comment can do that. And then we will open up the attendee list to see if anyone who's just listening also wants to make any comment or have questions about the process. So if that sounds okay with everyone, I take a nodding of some heads or some thumbs up. Any thumbs down? All right, looks like we got a consensus of thumbs up. All right, so here we go.
Paula, let me just
yes.
in terms of the hand raising, Brandon, I'm not really sure I can see that. If people enter an actual question, I can see that in the Q&A, but I don't know whether I'll be able to see the hands raised. Will I?
Murray has his hand up.
If you can see the questions for the hand raised of the panelists, but for attendees, no.
Right.
But again, you can type a question in the question box to the right of your screen. That would probably be best because you'll even have a record of it at that point.
That's good. Good suggestion, Kyle. Okay. I'm going to pull mine up and look at it as I'm talking to you guys. All right. So going through the charter, one of the first places that we made some changes were under general membership. There is a insertion here that came from our HUD TA to make stronger our language around making sure that we're recruiting a broad group of people to the CoC. It says on an annual and ongoing basis, the membership committee will ensure that invitations to join the CoC are made broadly through outreach to regional organizations that may have an interest in participating. General notice is posted on the appropriate planning council and collaborative applicant websites, word of mouth invitations, and other resource available for recruitment of new CoC members. The membership committee, as the membership committee, is responsible for outreach and will do so in collaboration with our collaborative applicant and our HMIS lead. And that was inserted again on the advice of HUD, technical assistance. We have a list of organizations, or broad array of membership includes representation from a bunch of different kinds of places. We added organizations focusing on racial justice and equity issues because for some reason we didn't have that and thought it would be really good. Moving on down to roles and responsibilities. Membership will meet at least twice annually. The general membership will be facilitated by a member of the executive committee of the planning council whenever possible, or a CoC member appointed by the planning council chair. Regularly scheduled meetings. Meeting agendas should be noticed at least 5 days in advance, with the exception of specially called meetings. All meeting notices and agendas should cite items that require a vote, and where applicable, advance notice is known. In compliance with state and federal law, all planning council and general membership meetings of the Nashville-Davidson County CoC shall be open to the public. So just some clarification on facilitation of the general membership meeting. And moving on down. Representation and voting. We added a third category of membership from organizational individuals. We also added that planning council members, whether appointed or elected by the general membership, are automatically going to be members of the CoC. They still have to meet the appropriate attendance requirement in order to be able to vote in the general membership meetings, but technically they should be members of the CoC if they're members of the governing body of the CoC. So, moving down a little bit more. Selection of planning council members, CoC representatives, talks about the nomination committees charged with developing, implementing ongoing process. We do take nominations from the floor during that process. We also thought it was very important to clarify that if someone is nominated from the floor during the process, that somehow that person needs to be able to confirm their acceptance of the nomination. It would not do or serve any of us well if we nominated someone who wasn't present, elected them, and then found out they didn't want to serve. So we need to be able to make sure that that's okay. Let's see. We also, due to everything that's happening right now, put in a clause that if elections are not able to be held in accordance with the timeline set out in our charter, the CoC membership may vote to extend the terms of membership elected representatives until such time as the election can be held, which is what we did this year. It wasn't specifically in our charter because, who knew about COVID before now? So we wanted to make sure that we give ourselves the ability in the future for whatever may happen. If we need to be able to stretch our timeline, we've given ourselves the flexibility to do that. Mayoral appointments, we also put in that the mayoral appointments can continue to serve until they can be replaced. We are in that situation right now. We need the mayor to appoint some members to the council. They've not yet been appointed, yet some folks have rolled off already. This would give us the ability to allow those people to stay until their replacement is actually in place. And the same with council representatives. All right. Roles and responsibilities of planning council. We also put the clause in here, except when the Tennessee governor has waived in-person meeting requirements due to declared public emergencies pursuant to Open Meeting Act. Conference calls or the use of telecommunication equipments are not acceptable means for communicating regarding the business of the planning council. So again, who knew about COVID? So we wanted again to make sure that our charter addresses that as we move forward. Continuing to move down through our charter. Officers of the planning council. Officers will be elected in the month prior to the beginning of the year to which they will serve. This was clarifying language about when the election should take place. Planning council may vote to extend the terms of officers into the next fiscal year when extenuating circumstances prevent a vote in accordance with the normal timeline. Again, giving ourselves flexibility that we technically did not have this year, but had to do anyway. Responsibility of the chair, makes appointments of committees, committee chairs. That's pretty much the same. No major changes until you get down to committees. Planning council may establish standing committees and specify that all standing and ad hoc committees shall serve a term of 1 year coinciding with the planning council fiscal year. Committee members may be added to committees at any time during the fiscal year as needed. That was, the language was not clear about when people should be reappointed to committees and committees changing over. Committees appointed by the chair. One of the things we also did and had a great discussion on, and there's a public comment on this, and we'll get to it a little bit more in depth as to why. All committees shall use this charter to define committee quorums, attendance requirements, code of conduct, and in the absence of specific guidance, may refer to the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order to conduct the business of the committee. We changed this to may refer instead of shall refer, because in so many ways we feel like none of us are experts in Robert's Rules of Order, and we open ourselves up to a lot of different potential issues around whether we did something specifically by Robert's rules or not, and if we didn't, was it valid, and a lot of issues around those kinds of things. And when none of us are experts in that particular area, we felt like it was important for us to say we can refer to Robert's rules as a guide. We are not using Robert's rules as an absolute. Standing committees, the executive committee. This is another place where the charter committee felt strongly that we needed to kind of tweak this. Last year, in the charter revisions, we added 2 people to the executive committee. Unfortunately, the way we wrote it is that it had to be 2 committee chairs. And as we began to try to find 2 committee chairs to appoint to the executive committee, we couldn't find any committee chairs who were also planning council members. And in order to be on the executive committee of the planning council, you have to be on the planning council. So we were never able to actually appoint 2 additional members to the executive committee. The charter committee and the executive committee actually feels very strongly that 3 people on that committee is not enough. We need a more diverse perspective. So we changed the language to the executive committee will be made up of the officers of the planning council and 2 additional planning council members appointed by the chair. So it doesn't limit us to specifically having committee chairs be also appointed to the executive committee, which gives some flexibility in terms of bringing in the appropriate diversity. I personally, and this is, will be for whatever your chair in the future wants to do. Personally, I want to make sure that someone on the executive committee with lived experience, and the way we had it written before prevented us from being able to accomplish that. So hopefully this will open that up a little bit more. In addition, there's also the need for, and this particular pandemic has shown us that the planning council may at any time empower the executive committee to attend to urgent business that may arise between regular planning council meetings, provided necessary decisions be made in accordance with planning council policies and strategic plans. This, once again, I think gives us some flexibility. There have been things that have happened in regard to responses to things that have happened here in Metro, and being able to respond to those things without having to call a special meeting, because that takes public notice and a lot of time. And if it's an urgent matter, it needs to be taken care of urgently, not in 10 days or whenever after you have to call a public meeting. This is not a carte blanche, executive committee can do whatever. It's whatever the executive committee does, it's limited to following policies and strategic plans that have been laid out in the planning council strategic planning. So, all right. And again, we're going through this. I want folks to hold their questions, and we'll get to the questions once we get through. We're almost done. The next change was under the performance evaluation committee. Again, this was something that was added via HUD's technical assistance. The performance evaluation will consult with the collaborative applicant, recipients, and subrecipients to establish performance targets appropriate for population and program type, monitor recipient and subrecipient performance, evaluate outcomes, and take action against poor performers. Again, that was specifically something that came from our technical assistance, and that's why that was inserted as part of the performance evaluation committee. Moving through down to the collaborative applicant, there. Number 9 under collaborative applicant, this was actually changed. This was the one change that was made after public comment, and we'll get to the public comment, but it says, to the extent practicable, the collaborative applicant will track and or measure performance among homeless assistance programs that are not funded by the CoC. Again, something that HUD wants to see us trying to do, but clearly that's something that we don't necessarily have a lot of control over. But there's a lot of information that goes into HMIS from non-funded entities that we can use to do some evaluation of the services that we have across the board here. We did some changing around HMIS lead. Again, a lot of this was because of input from our HUD technical assistants to make sure that we were doing the things that we needed to do from an HMIS lead perspective. As the governing body for the CoC, the Planning Council will be responsible for entering into an operational agreement with the designated HMIS lead. HMIS lead agency, in conjunction with the HMIS Oversight Committee, will develop and maintain HMIS policies, procedures, and standards related to functionality, privacy, security, and data quality. Again, that came from HUD, language that they wanted to see inserted. All right. Section number 7, general provisions, operating year, and meeting procedures. All CoC-related entities will strive to ensure that participants are able to offer their opinions and perspectives on agenda items that are up for discussion. All CoC-related meetings, therefore, will be conducted in a manner that ensures fairness and reasonable participation by members of the Planning Council and the CoC and their respective committees. When questions about parliamentary procedure arise, each CoC-related entity may refer to Robert's Rules of Order and other sources of guidance for resolving issues concerning decision-making. Again, this gives us the ability to consult Robert's Rules if we need some help, but it does not mandate that we follow Robert's Rules specifically in the conducting meetings. And then finally, a little bit of tweaking of the language in the adoption and amendment of bylaws in conjunction with the collaborative advocate and HMIS lead. The draft must be posted for a review for 15 days. This was another place we had shortened it from 30 to 10, and based on public comment. I'm sorry, this was the other place where we did change something based on public comment. We the committee thought that we would change that to 15 instead of 10 and felt like that was reasonable. All right. Any input resulting in a change to the proposed document shall be offered as an amendment during the discussion deliberation prior to the final vote by the CoC general membership on the proposed revisions, changes, and amendments adopted during discussion deliberations during the meeting for which the final vote has been called are not subject to further public notice prior to the final vote. This was important language because if in the way that we had it written is if we today were to make substantial changes to this document, it would need to go back out for another 30-day public comment vote before it came back to actually be ratified. So what we've tried to do here is say that we've put it out for public comment. We're going to come back, we're going to discuss it. If there are further revisions that need to be made in the meeting that it does not require then further comment, we could go ahead and make those and go ahead and adopt the thing. Because what happens is if we did that, then we would never be able to adopt the document. We could continue to, every time we met, make revisions and never actually get back to a final vote. So hopefully this gives clarity to that, continuing to maintain the opportunity for there to be revision from the floor, but gives us the ability to do that, adopt it, and move on. So that is the main piece. Do I have questions right now that I can answer about anything from anybody?
Paula, I would just ask functionally whether it is best to take a motion to accept so that the questions could be answered during the discussion. And
That makes perfect sense, Mr. Muldoon.
If so, then I would make a motion that we accept orders as written / revised in its current nature.
I second that motion. Kyle Duvall.
All right, we have a motion and a second. So now we will open it up to further discussion around this. I want to go ahead. I want to give you time, anybody to ask questions, but then I'm going to go through the public comments to make sure that we have addressed those comments to make so that everyone knows that the committee was trying to be thoughtful in responding to those. But does anyone have a burning question or thought around the charter at this point? I'm not seeing any, which Lord mercy. Okay.
I just want to thank the Charter Committee for your great work on this. I know it's not easy to go back and forth through through a document like this. And I just wanted to thank you for the time and effort on behalf of the CoC.
Thank you, Carrie. And on that note, let me say thank you to Marissa Smith-Fletcher, Jonathan Adair, who are two new members of this group this year, and to Norman and Kyle and Mark Overlock. Their thoughtful input, Kyle, particularly with your historic knowledge of where we've come from. It was a good working group, and we came to some really good consensus, and I appreciate all of their hard work. All right, I'm not seeing any other little hands raised on the side here. If you are listening and not able to say something but you want to, can you please text Susie so we can get you unmuted? Or can we? Yeah, I'm not sure otherwise how to do that.
We'll need to ask Brandon to unmute everyone so that the public that is calling in could be able to sort of verbally ask any questions or make any comments.
Yeah, can we do that?
They're unmuted now.
All right. So lots of folks calling in, about 17 people on the call-in list. Do any of you have any questions or issues you want to raise at the moment? All right, and hearing none, okay, we can put those back on mute for now. All right, let me go as quickly as I can through the public comments so that we can then move on. First comment we received was about language being added around if committee members can be removed from their committees, if so, how, and it should be added that the committee chairs can remove committee members only with the approval of the executive committee. We didn't change anything in the charter around this at the moment, but we will continue to take a look at that and see if we need to do that in the future. Our thought was this could be more of a policy issue, and as we try to develop those policy and procedure manuals, we could put it there. But we decided as a committee that this could be something we'll put in a parking lot to see if we need to revise in the future. All right. The second comment was had to do with something that we did change. Under duties of the collaborative applicant, the 9th duty was that the collaborative applicant will measure performance among homeless assistance programs that are not funded through the CoC. Want to know what an example of that was. And again, we looked at it and thought, well, that's a good question. We don't do a whole lot of monitoring of performance for folks who are not funded through the CoC. However, HUD wants us to take more responsibility in making sure that services across the board meet certain standards. So we can do that, again, by beginning to look at information that's coming in through HMIS and developing some ways to track and monitor those things. Again, the CoC does not have purview over programs who are out there working who are not funded to demand that they do things differently, but it's part of tracking and trying to understand what services that we do have. And yeah, so we added that to the extent practicable, the collaborative applicant will be doing that. That was a good point. And that came from Carrie. Thanks, Carrie. All right. The third public comment had multiple pieces. This came from Steve Ryder. Some of the areas that he was concerned about, it was the 10-day public comment period was too short. He wanted it to be 30. The committee discussed that and did change it to 15 instead of 10. So we kind of split the difference there a little bit. One of the reasons is particularly when we're in situations like we're in now, it's very cumbersome to wait that long. And we hope that folks will, take a look at whatever is out for public comment in a reasonable amount of time and make those comments and get those back in so that we can always move forward. So unless someone has a huge issue with it being 15 instead of 30, that's what the committee is recommending. The membership committee should not be responsible for public invitations to join our CoC. The collaborative applicant gets federal funding and should make efforts to publish a public notice to invite new members. That they do. The collaborative applicant is part of that, but the charter committee felt like a responsibility of the membership committee is member recruitment. So we felt it was appropriate to leave that there. And again, that came from HUD technical assistance wanting us to add something that was a little stronger language about recruiting new members to the CoC. The next was the general membership should elect its own chairperson to preside over the meetings. They are two separate bodies. Furthermore, the general membership should meet at the pleasure of the group, but no less than twice a year pursuant to federal regulations. So the charter committee considered this, and we went over it, kind of ad nauseum through the process, but feeling very much like, based on some issues that we had last year, that it was difficult to find someone to facilitate this particular meeting. So there needed to be some specifics in the charter around who should do that. Most of the time, I will tell you, we're looking for a volunteer. We had some issues last year about someone who was a committee chair being the facilitator around those issues. And again, that's where Robert's rules came into play, and none of us were really sure how to make that work. So we put this language in around who will facilitate, specifically to make sure that that didn't encumber us from doing the business of the CoC going forward. I personally, the comment about the general membership and the planning council being two separate bodies, I cannot reiterate enough that that is not the case. The planning council is the governing body of the continuum of care. Therefore, they are the same. They're the same entity. They're part of the same entity. We're a group that has a governing body. They can't be separate. They are not two separate entities. The CoC is a body made up of people who are part of the CoC. It's not a separate entity. All right. The next was increased attendance requirements for voting privilege from 50% to at least 2/3. The charter committee felt comfortable leaving it at 50%. The next was there are reasons to develop policies and procedures. Therefore, it needs to be made clear that the CoC will be governed by Robert's Rules of Order. Again, this was something that we discussed ad nauseum and really felt like it was important for us to be able to refer to Robert's rules, but not be bound specifically, because none of us are parliamentarians. None of us know the intricacies of Robert's Rules of Order. If we were to do something and had a technical issue around not doing it the way that is laid out in Robert's rules, it could prevent us from being able to move forward. And again, none of us are experts, and we didn't feel like it was appropriate for us to bind ourselves to that as we go forward. This next one was to prevent stacking the deck. The number of committee members should remain stable in the current year to which they serve. The general membership should appoint an equal number of people to all committees to provide balance. Each committee chair should be elected by the committee. Since the CoC membership organization is a membership organization, all committee members must be members of the CoC. This, again, were things that we have talked about both in the charter committee and in other committees and in the general membership. We believe that it's incredibly important to try to recruit folks to come be part of our committee structure who may not have already joined the CoC. Part of that is part of recruitment, trying to get folks interested in being part of what we do by getting them onto a specific committee where we know the work is done so that they can see what we do and how we do it. So it's used in some ways as a recruiting tool. So we didn't feel like, mandating that they have to be members of the CoC in order to be on a committee was appropriate. The other piece about the general membership appointing an equal number of people to all the committees are made up primarily of people from the general membership. So I don't know that that's necessary to change. The charter committee didn't feel like there was any changes to the charter that we needed to make based on this comment. The Homeless Planning Council ordinance needs to be modified because 3-year appointments is inconsistent with metro mayoral and council elections. I don't necessarily disagree, but that is not something the charter committee has purview over, so we moved on. The next was with planned reductions in general membership and planning council meetings. The executive committee appears to be seeking more authority to conduct CoC business. However, this will lead to communication problems because the CoC members will not be in the loop or adequately briefed and consulted on CoC business. If urgent business needs to be addressed, the standard procedure is to call a special meeting. Also, a community organization such as our CoC does not need to have an executive committee. The federal government provides our funding and the CoC does not hire its own staff. It should be abolished. The charter committee respectfully disagrees with that statement. We feel like it is imperative for the CoC Planning Council to have an executive committee. And hopefully the language that we inserted around ensuring that the executive committee in making any decisions is bound to follow the policy, procedures, and strategic planning of the CoC in order for there not to be too much power given to that particular committee. The other thing is, unfortunately, and we've seen it now in these times, it is very difficult to call a special meeting, and it is time, and you have to make sure you're giving appropriate notice. And there are things that need to be responded to immediately. The one example that we will give you is that as we move forward, we know that we are trying to look to see if the CoC can bring in other sources of fundings beyond HUD. And sometimes there are very tight guidelines and timeframes around funding streams. And the turnaround may be so quick that you don't have time to get approval from the full planning council or general membership in order to make that funding request. Therefore, the planning council could empower the executive committee to make the decision about whether to apply for funding and how to do that and make it happen without having to call a special meeting. That's just an example. We don't know if that will happen, but we wanted to make sure that there was the flexibility for the planning council to be able to empower the executive committee to do those things if necessary. This is not, it's not out of line with what most nonprofits and other organizations do in terms of their committee structure, and we thought it was appropriate to do for ours. The next one was the charter committee chair should not be the CoC chair. This arrangement can grant the CoC chair extraordinary power over the CoC and can be problematic. I 150,000% wholeheartedly agree with that statement. However, unfortunately, that didn't happen this year. I tried to twist some arms, but nobody wanted to be the chair of the charter committee. So I continued to do that and shepherded us through this role. But I am more than happy to give up that responsibility. We did not change that in the charter itself, but as a best practice going forward, we will certainly make sure that we try to do that, because I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. And I can see exactly where it looks like it could be problematic, and I don't want that to have the appearance to be that way in the future. So we'll do the best we can to make sure that we can cajole someone to taking on the leadership role of the charter committee from this point forward. All right. The next was, this section should say that the planning council is the primary decision-making body, but does not have the power to act on behalf of the CoC. For example, the power to update the charter is the sole responsibility of the general membership. Also, the planning council should approve its own minutes, not the general memberships. Again, we do believe that the planning council does have the power to act on behalf of the CoC. That's what the governing body was created to do. So that doesn't seem to be something that we would want to try to change. As for approving minutes, the planning council does approve its own minutes, and it does not approve the general membership minutes. So I'm not sure exactly what that was about. The next one is the 3-year date for the CoC general membership to designate collaborative applicant and HMIS lead is unworkable. It seems by design the CoC charter will be regularly revised and push back the 3-year date into perpetuity. A fixed date certain needs to be adopted for the appropriate review. We discussed this again at length, and there's a lot of reasons that it's very difficult, and we changed this from it being an annual appointment to every 3 years, because it becomes difficult sometimes in the time frame of HUD and the release of the funding application, and when all those things happen, and we want to stay ahead of those things by being more prepared. And so a 3-year, we didn't change this from last year. This was the same as it was last year. Okay. Other items that need to be addressed. The CoC needs to select a custodian of records. It makes no sense to elect a secretary that has no responsibility in this area. The secretary position of the planning council should be eliminated. The charter committee disagreed that it should be eliminated, and made no changes to the responsibilities of that position. There's no dedicated public comment period at any of our CoC meetings. It is unfortunate that the people our CoC is intended to serve do not have the ability to bring their concerns to the attention of the group. The charter committee was a little bit confused by this particular statement, because the CoC general membership meeting is the CoC general membership meeting, and anyone who wants to speak can speak during that time. And all of the things that happen in the general membership meeting are brought to the attention of the planning council. So we weren't sure exactly where that came from, because We know that there's no dedicated public comment period at the planning council meetings, but the CoC meeting is a meeting of the general membership, and anyone who comes has the ability to be able to speak. And the last one was federal regulations require CoC members to disclose any conflicts of interest prior to the start of our meetings. Likewise, Metro Legal needs to disclose that. By Metro Charter, their client is Metro Social Services. An attorney has a duty of loyalty to their client and represents their interests. It is well established that our CoC is not a board or commission of Metro government. Therefore, it is not ethically permissible under the rules of professional conduct for lawyers that the Metro Department of Law can give the mistaken impression that they can offer independent legal advice to our CoC. We are giving that comment to Metro Legal. In addition, we discussed it, and we truly felt that, number one, we are a Metro entity. We were created by ordinance to govern the continuum of care. So therefore, we must abide by rules of Metro. We may not be appointed by the Metro Council, but we still have to adhere to all of the conditions of being a Metro entity. That includes, when we meet in person, meeting in a Metro facility, and following the recommendations of Metro Legal when it comes to our operation. So we didn't feel like we could change anything regarding that in the charter. So that's it. So I'm going to open it up, and if we could unmute folks who are on the line as attendees, so anyone could chime in if they want to, and I will open it up to any further questions or thoughts around what we've done here before we move on to a vote.
I would simply state, since I made the original motion, that given the additional discussion, that motion stands as was stated earlier.
Okay. Does anyone else want to make any comments or ask any questions?
Holly, you said something about all of our meetings have to be in a Metro facility. Could you expound on that? If we've been meeting at the mission, which wasn't a.
So the general membership is not a Metro created entity. The planning council is. I'm sorry, I didn't clarify that. So while the general membership can meet anywhere we want, the planning council was created by a Metro ordinance. Therefore, the planning council has to follow those open meeting regulations and all of the other things that associated with being a Metro entity. Okay. Other questions or thoughts?
Did we have a second on that motion?
We did. The second was, it was seconded by Kyle. I believe, Steve, do you have your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
You just said that the planning council has to follow what's in the ordinance, but the general membership can meet at the mission. So we are two separate entities then. I mean, either we're not meeting at the mission or we're meeting somewhere else. It's perfectly clear that the planning council and the general membership are different. They're not the same. And to go out there and say, well, they're the CoC, that part is true. But we're totally different. The general membership should have the right to elect their own chair. They really should. And it is really difficult to understand why we have to go out there and just have the planning council that rules everything. You don't want to hear from me or anybody who's you serve. I mean, it's kind of insulting to hear that, well, we've had public comment before, but we don't want to hear those people anymore. You know, I take great offense to that. I'm not a service provider. I don't get any allocation. But it's really insulting to hear that all the people that I've seen over time, Barry Hobbs, Howard Allen, and everybody who's disagreed with anybody, and the CoC is gone. Samuel Lester, Dennis Huey, Floyd Schechter left, all because of differences that we couldn't resolve. And unless we can figure out some way to deal with conflict resolution, because we're not able to do that. It's really sad that we just, in one of the comments, how do we remove people? Well, I know that's directed towards me. I mean, it's obvious. There's people who want to get rid of me. I get it. I really do. but I should have the right to speak, and we should be able to agree to disagree. And the public comments that I put forward, along with some other people, nobody got that sent out to them. It was just, well, here's what was said. It would be nice if you saw all my comments and everybody's comments in their entirety, not just, well, this is what was said. Because I did say that 100% attendance is expected. That wasn't brought up there when I went for the 2/3. So it would have been nice if Susie, as the collaborative applicant, everything went out to MDHA, but all those comments, we didn't have the courtesy of getting a copy of that ahead of time. So yes, there are changes that I'd like to see done on transparency and how we work together, but you don't make it very easy for people that might have a different opinion to go out there and get some reforms done. Thank you.
Steve, first, let me say very, very clearly that I apologize if you are offended. That was never my intention, and I'm pretty sure it's not the intention of any other member of the Charter Committee or any other committee. So please, I accept my apology for feeling offended. I don't know what else to say about that. I do not believe that the comment around removing committee members was directed specifically at you. I think it is part of trying to make sure that we have processes in place across the board. And if you felt it was directed at you, again, I apologize for that. I don't, it was not my feeling at all. And lastly, I would say that you can be a pain in the butt, and I appreciate that in so many ways. You raise issues that many of us don't want to think about, yet you do. And not in a million, thousand years would I ever really want your voice to be silenced. And if you felt like that we were trying to silence you, again, I apologize for that, because that is not our intention. You make us think in ways that sometimes we do not. And you're right, we don't always agree. There are many things we do not agree on. But I am more than happy always to listen to what you have to say. So again, I can only apologize for the way you feel like you've been treated, and hope that we can move forward and that you feel like your voice is being heard. As far as the public comment periods for the Planning Council, those public comments, for many reasons, they were ended a few years ago as part of trying to make sure that we were able to make it through the agenda in a timely fashion. And there may be an opportunity to reinstate those. I don't know. It's something that we can consider, depending on how we move forward with those meetings, and when we hopefully get back face to face, because it will be much easier to do it at that point in time. But I do want you to remain as active and involved as you have been, because I don't think that we would be as good as we are if it weren't for you and others pushing the envelope and making us stop and think about things that we don't want to think about. So that's all I can say about that, and I appreciate you being a part of it. Do we have other questions and concerns and thoughts?
Yeah, I would like to just kind of chime in for a moment here. You know, going through this laboriously today, I'm sure everybody's kind of nodding off, and we get that, because there's an awful lot of tedium that goes into pulling this together. But I wanted to kind of, from a historical standpoint, say this. I remember the very first time we started this charter, and kudos to Kirby Davis and others who at least put forth a charter that we were required to have, and HUD was pushing for that. But let me just highlight a few things. As we progress through this experience, we have seen this document become a living document and change many, many times. For example, we were meeting 12 times a year or thereabouts. Well, now we're meeting less. Our committee structure, they were much smaller. We didn't have nearly as many, and we had about half the board members we have, our planning council we have now. The point is, the more people that participate, the stronger we're going to be. So we're seeing more committee structures, which we're going to have. The fewer meetings, someone's going to have to step up to the plate and lead, and that someone is all of us together. So I think that we're going to see much more growth by individuals that participate on committees. And as we have more participants, yes, the stronger we will be. Then last year, if you will recall, the Homelessness Commission, which is now the Homelessness Impact Division, that became a huge part of our charter, and we had to redo it to make accommodations for that as well. But going forward, what I feel is important and that we're starting to see this continuum of care is not simply about HUD. We speak a lot and we're HUD centric, but to attract more individuals, not only our funding stream sources, but that tent needs to be broad enough where people want to be a part of this continuum of care in a greater degree than now. So if we provide more opportunity on our committees, and if we will simply step forward, then our voices will be heard more dynamically. So again, a living document, the last thing I'll say, we do need to develop bylaws, we do need policies, and we need to work on these, and we will do that in the coming days. Thank you.
Kyle, thank you very much. In the interest of time, we're at 11 o'clock now, and we still have some other agenda items that we need to get to. So unless there are any other burning questions, comments, or issues that we need to address around the charter, I would like us to move forward with a vote.
Call the previous question.
All right. Okay. So Susie, will you go through the roll call and do the vote, please?
Kathy Taylor,
Yes.
Catholic Charities, Kim,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Community Care Fellowship, with us, Tyler Orion. Community Care
Yes.
Fellowship.
This is Ryan. Yes.
Kathy. Victor, Kathy Jennings. And moving on. Empower Tennessee, Marissa.
Yes.
Mary Catherine.
Yes.
Reba.
Yeah.
Catherine's office is pretty.
You guys might want to mute your phones. Mending Hearts, your mental health cooperative, Tracy.
Andrew Case is on there in his house.
Yes.
No, he's like
Metro Health Department, Julie.
him, Kyle, and Bill.
Yes.
Impact Division, Abigail.
We're gonna try to.
Yes.
Services, Giovanni, I think you're here instead of Lee. You may be on mute, Giovanni. Nashville Cares, Grant.
Yes.
Downtown Partnership, Adam.
Yes.
Rescue Mission, Carrie.
Yes.
Healthcare for the Homeless, Cindy.
Yes.
Leanne. I reached you earlier, but I know you're tuned in. Neighborhood Health, Crystal.
Yes.
Next door, Kim. I know you're here. You there? Oasis Center, Carrie.
Yes.
Operation Stand Down, Sean.
Yes.
Park Center, Ashley.
Yes.
School House, I don't think Paula's. Paula, are you here? Room at the end, Rachel or Martina?
Yes.
Safe Haven Family Shelter, Jennifer or TJ?
Yes.
Jesse at Salvation Army?
Yes.
Works, Maria?
Yes.
W, Paula?
Yes.
Ed Way, Matt?
Yep.
Housing, Quincy?
Yes.
Hey, Whitney?
Yes.
Home, Daryl?
Yes.
YWCA, Hannah?
Yes.
Ryder?
No surprise, no.
Okay. Hold on. I've added up wrong, but that is definitely the majority saying. Again, let me remind folks who may not be registered as having attended, or maybe you're having problems being heard. Please do email me and let me know that you are listening in and participating so that your agency or you as an individual get credit for attendance. And Paul and I talked, and I think I have emailed a number of you who are on the agenda today, that we might run out of time as we have, and I think we can get written summaries out to the community versus an actual presentation today, unless there's something, some issue that's burning.
All right, so thank you all very much. The charter has passed, and we will move forward from here. Again, thank you to the committee for all your work. Thank you for all the comments that came in, and we will continue. All right, so Susie, do you go over any of the, or do we need to go ahead and
I don't think anything is that urgent that it can't be broadcast in a written summary out to the listserv. And I appreciate those of you who were willing to take some time today, Arthur from Step Down and Heather, who does HUD TA, to talk about the ESG. But I think, again, that sort of stuff can be summarized in writing and sent out that way.
All right, so then I will ask if anyone has any other business or anything that they want to ask regarding the agenda items that we're going to follow up in writing about before we then ask to adjourn.
Sally Lott, or if you're on, do you want to just briefly talk about the CE evaluation, and then we can get a written summary out about that too?
Yes, that would be great. I do want to mention really quick that the proposed updated coordinated entry policies and procedures manual is out, and this is the 30-day public comment period. It ends on August 31st. So if you have any comments on that updated manual that Susie can resend out, you can email those to the Nashville CES at nashville.gov website. And the CE evaluation report is also out. Susie's going to send it to the listserv. It was presented at the Planning Council this month. And thank you for everyone that participated. And I just highly encourage you read over it and look particularly at the recommendations for CE improvement moving forward.
Thank you, Sally. That's awesome. All right, do we have anything else that we need to cover today? Carrie?
Paula, I'm just wondering if we can anticipate that at next month's meeting that we're going to hear from what was formerly called the Cold Weather Committee.
Yeah, it's called the Shelter Committee now. And
Yes,
I would hope that going into the fall, we would have some update on some thoughts and things that are happening through that committee. We'll make sure that I personally would like to know more. So yes, we'll make sure that happens.
Great, thank you.
Sure, thank you, Carrie. Anyone else?
Really quickly, this is Rachel Cook over at the Homeless Impact Division. I just wanted to share what's going on in our HMIS. Our HMIS users have received lots of communication over the past week or two about this, but our HMIS has entered a new era of data sharing among participating agencies. There's a new release of information that allows for valid release for 3 years, and then allows for data sharing with consent by the client between Nashville's HMIS participating agencies. So that is live, and we're really excited about that. If anyone has any questions or needs a copy of the form, feel free to send me an email and we'll get that out to you.
Thank you, Rachel. All
I
right.
know that we were deciding to meet less often, but I do feel like this huge infusion of ESG funds and other CARE Act funds, and the fact that today's meeting really didn't allow for some of the other agenda items, it might be a good idea to go ahead and plan on a September meeting, and then perhaps we can take off in October, just depending on what happens with the continuum of care funding announcement.
Does anyone have any objection to having a September meeting?
Can that meeting be held virtually, or does it have to be in person?
So I don't know how long the governor extended his order. Does anyone off the top of their head?
Yeah, this is Abigail Dell from the Homeless Impact Division, and the governor's order is extended through August. So if he does not extend it, we will have to meet in person. So if you know anyone at state departments or state representatives that you would like to advocate that it be extended, I would recommend that.
Thank you, Abigail.
Can we choose to have a hybrid of in-person and Zoom type thing, or is it either or?
Well, I think, yeah, and I think that a lot of that depends on the governor's order.
Well, would some of that also depend on whether we're doing a vote or not? Because if we did not have a vote, then that would be a ad hoc committee.
I'm sorry, say that again, Sean. You cut out at the end there.
If we weren't taking a vote, if it was just an informational meeting, would that put us in a different circumstance if the governor has not changed his order?
You know what? I don't know. We'd have to look into that.
So I can say from my conversation with Metro Legal that because we have more than one planning council member as a part of this voting body, we would still have to do in person. And I believe that we've got it in the charter that the CoC membership meeting has to be in person unless extended by emergency order. So we'll look into it a little bit more and just run it past those really based on what happens, but it will very likely have to be in person if the order is not extended.
Yeah, that's what I understand too. Julie?
So I'm a little confused just because in terms of public health orders and how many people can gather and meet, we're Metro, we follow Metro guidance. So if we're still in phase 2 and no more than 25 people are able to meet in person, it would just force us to not meet if the governor doesn't extend.
That's very astute and incredibly. So I think at this point, it's a wait and see. We don't know. I would hope that out of that kind of place with public health issues that the governor will continue to extend his order. But again, I think it's probably worth everyone sending an email to the governor's office and asking him to do so. Because if he doesn't extend the order, then we have no choice but to meet in person. And then that puts us in a place to figure out how to do that without violating Metro's public health orders. It's a bit of a catch-22, I think. So thank you for bringing that up. But you hit the nail right on the head. All right, any or bring up before we adjourn?
Well, I don't know that you guys have made a public announcement of who the new planning council positions are, since those were voted on at the beginning of August.
Did we not send that out? Susie, can you read those off real quick and then make sure that that goes out with other things when you send it? I thought it went out, but
I don't know whether I sent it along, but let me get that from the Homeless Impact Division and then send that to the CoC general membership.
Well, can we just announce who the new officers are for the year?
The new officers of the Planning Council?
Yes.
Oh, real quickly. So the Planning Council in its last meeting elected officers for the coming year. April Calvin was reelected as secretary. Elena Boyer as vice chair, and I was reelected as chair. And since we just passed the new charter, I am going to be reaching out and asking for a couple of folks to join that executive committee from the planning council. So if you're a planning council member and you're on this call right now, beware, I might be reaching out. All right. Anything else? You guys, thank you for your patience, for your diligence and being part of this and navigating through technology and all the things that, you know, go well and go wrong as we meet this way. And a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Sean. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by, who is that? Julie Thacker. All in favor of adjourning, please say goodbye and log off.
Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.